This is section 1-2 of Financial Algebra, entitled Travel Expenses. The quote here is, "Travel is the only thing you buy that makes you richer." If you think about that, that's probably a very true statement, that travel is the only thing you buy that makes you richer. The objectives of this lesson are to determine and interpret cumulative frequency, determine and interpret relative frequency, determine and interpret relative cumulative frequency, model a situation using a spreadsheet, and determine and interpret percentiles. The key terms in this section are as follows. Now, they're fairly complicated in terms of the definition, so you may want to go over these again at a later date. But anyway, here are the four main terms that we're going to learn in this lesson. The first is cumulative frequency. This is the running total of all frequencies that are less than or equal to the frequency of that interval. Repeat. The running total of all frequencies that are less than or equal to the frequency of that interval. So you're at a particular level and you want to have the total of all that are less than or equal to that. The next is relative frequency. This is the ratio of the frequency of a particular interval to the total number of pieces of data collected. This probably is pretty straightforward, but let me repeat it. The ratio of the frequency of a particular interval to the total number of pieces of data collected. The next is relative cumulative frequency. Now this is the ratio of the cumulative frequency of an interval to the total number of pieces of data collected. Okay, notice the difference between relative cumulative frequency and relative frequency. Relative frequency is the ratio of the frequency of a particular interval to the total number of pieces of data. Relative cumulative frequency is the ratio of the cumulative frequency of an interval to the total number of pieces of data collected. And then lastly, percentile rank. This is the percentage of numbers that fall at or below a given number in the list. So this is, again, the percentage of numbers that fall at or below a given number in the list. We're going to have a lot of examples here to help to explain these terms. So let's take a look here. All right, let's look at an example here. How many of the trips listed in the summer travel table, frequency distribution table, on page 14, this is in your textbook, were less than 1,000 miles? Okay, so here's the chart. You got summer travel. On the left column, we got long distance miles. We got 50 to 250, 250 to 500, 500 to 1,000, and over 1,000. The right column, we have the number of long distance summer trips in each of these intervals, okay? So, in order to find the answer to our question, we're going to have to add another column. Now, the column we added is the cumulative frequency column, okay? And basically, how do we figure this out? All right. The first row, it's pretty straightforward. The number between 50 and 250 is 512,460,000, and we just bring that directly over, okay? Now, the next the next row, from 200 to 500, we got 72,270,000. We add these two, okay? We add the first row and the second row, and that gives us this value of 584,730,000. And we continue doing this, okay? So the next row, 500 to 1,000, it's this. We add it again to the total, and now the total of these three numbers, this number, and this number, is this 617,580,000. Then lastly, numbers over 1,000, we add this number and we end up with 650,430,000. Now, what were the questions? So, how many of the trips were less than 1,000 miles? Less than 1,000 miles, that's this one right here, okay? That's the total number that were less than 1,000. How many were less than 500? That would be this one right here, okay? So, now that should help you better understand what we mean by cumulative frequency. All right, let's look at example 2. The flight travel website reported the following airfare booking expenses for the week of July 4th. What proportion of the tickets sold had a cost greater than or equal to 400 and less than or equal to 499? All right, so we start on the left here with our table showing ticket cost and number of bookings, okay? Now, we're going to add to that this column, relative frequency. Okay, how do we calculate the relative frequency? The relative frequency is simply this formula here. Relative frequency is equal to the frequency over the total number. So we add up the total number of bookings. The total number of bookings is down here, okay? Now, to figure out the relative frequency, we take the number of bookings and divide it by the total number. And we come out with a decimal. Now they want it rounded to the nearest thousandth, so that's 3 decimal places. And we keep going down here. So it's 120 over 1434, 310 over 1434, 282 over 1434. Now, so that we come up with this other column of relative frequency. Now, what is the proportion of the tickets sold had a cost greater than 400 and less than 499? Well, that is this row here, okay? And if we look at that, we come out with a relative frequency of that. So it's 0.197, which you could also say is 19.7% of the tickets were in this range. All right, now let's look at example 3. We're going to take the same data we had from the previous example, but now put it in a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. Now notice we have our columns. We have our A column, we have our B column, and we have our C column. And the rows, therefore, are labeled 1, 2, 3, all the way down here. I believe the last one is 12, okay? So it says, write the spreadsheet formula that would find the sum of the relative frequencies and enter that calculated amount in C12. Well, C12 is down here. All right, here's relative frequency, the C column, all right? Now, to figure out what this is equal to, the formula that you use, you plug into this cell down here is simply this right here. Equals the sum C2 colon C11. Basically, it's taking from C2, which is a 0.049, to C11, 0.015, and adding them up and putting them down here in C12. Well, if we type this into this cell and then hit enter, the answer we're going to get is 1. And that makes sense, okay? Because if you think of it, the total number here is 1434. So if you add up each of the percentages here, it's going to come out to be 1. All right, now let's look at example 4. Extend the relative frequency table on page 16 to determine the percent of the flight travel bookings that are below $600, okay? So, that are below $600. So now we're looking for everything below 600, all right? So that's basically this range here, this total amount here. So that's going to be cumulative frequency. So the cumulative frequency that's below 600 is 950. So there's 950 bookings that are below 600. And what's the total number of bookings? So if we look at the column to the right of the 950, we see the value of 0.662. So that means 66.2% of the bookings are less than $600. Because remember, how did we get relative cumulative frequency? We took the cumulative frequency and divided it by the total number of bookings. All right, we have one last example here. Okay, example 5. Most cities have some form of taxi cab service for short distance trips. Usually the cab fares are either a flat fee for a specified distance or a metered fee. The metered cabs often start with an initial fee and then charge a fixed rate per fraction of a mile driven. In many cities, wait time and number of stops often affect the fare as well. The website taxifarefinder.com offers a ranking of cities by the cost of a hypothetical taxi trip of a given duration and distance. Of the top 80 most expensive cities, these are the initial cab fees in ranked order. Okay, so we've got a grand total here of 80, all right? All right, so what is the percentile rank of $3 initial cab fees? If we look at these are ranked in order, and we take and add up all the ones that are $3 or less. So basically we're talking all of these, all right? If we add all these up, we get 56, and I've got a typo here. This should not be 90, this is 80. Okay, so that should be 80. All right, so just ignore that. That should be 80. All right, so if we take 56, divide it by 80, multiply by 100, we should come out with 70%. Okay, so that's the percentile rank. 70% of the fares are $3 or less. Okay,